Welcome into a hot football show. My name is Zach Lyons, joined by Easton Freeze and producer JT of the Hot Read podcast. Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group, are our sponsor. Sinkers Beverages, they drive so you can drink if you order them on Uber Eats. East Nashville, award-winning, has multiple awards, many awards. They have a cabinet for the awards, many awards.
So many awards. People are saying the most awards.
The most awards. People are saying the hugest of awards belong to Seekers Beverages, East Nashville, Tennessee. For all your liquor needs and for all your home remodeling needs is the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Locally owned, locally operated, is one of the best. I mean, I've been inside some of their homes. We actually live broadcast from their homes. Beautiful homes and remodels and kitchens. Definitely need to go check out buildkg.com, the Kingston Group. All right. JT, Easton, Zach, we're going to kind of like be splitting a little bit of hosting duties, but for the most part, we're just going to be talking about the Tennessee Titans because that's what everybody wants to talk about on a Thursday. And unfortunately, the only people that don't want to talk about the Tennessee Titans are the four players that they signed who gave some of the worst press conferences I've ever seen. So, Easton, JT, were you at the press conference too?
I was not, but I share the same sentiment. And after, specifically, I thought, after Lloyd Cushenberry's press availability today, I texted Easton, who was there, and I said, the Titans, I see the vision, right? I understand what they're doing, especially with that left side of the line. They are trying to make the worst media availability left side of a line I've ever seen. And that would include Lloyd Cushenberry, followed by Peter Skoronski, followed by, if they were to select Joe Alt, that completes the trifecta right there. It would be the most
media out of business. It would be a disaster.
The most milquetoast left side of a line I've ever seen in my entire life. But no, yes, it was I didn't expect a lot, and I still was kind of let down with what happened today, to be honest.
Ethan, let me ask you, do you think that Rand signed all these players so his press conferences will look better next to those press conferences?
Yes, it's all about it's all about being better in comparison. That's 100% what it is. I don't think he even watched the tape on these guys. I think it was entirely watching
Kenneth Murray.
Sure. He may really have not watched any tape.
Maybe for NWI and Jack Gibbons too. Well, we don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the number one priority for him is make me look good and then play good football in that order.
Well, you were there. I mean, you were there in person. I'm assuming that Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan were in the room at least.
They were vibing in the back on a couch. Rand was on his phone the whole time, scrolling on something.
There's a casting couch in the press conference room, huh?
Well, it's not. So this was at the third floor in St. Thomas Sports Park where they do like their big indoor pressers. So we're rarely up there. I don't know why they decided to do it today because maybe they expected a lot more people to show up, but they had all these seats out and it was like a setup for an introductory press conference for the head coach. And it was just kind of like the normal group. So I don't know why.
Maybe they just left all the chairs there.
Maybe that would, a laziness angle is a possibility there.
Yeah. Elevator ride up. Okay. You made it
Took
up
the stairs.
No,
we learned from that mistake. Took the stairs, got my steps in.
Elevators.
Yeah, no, I walked in. Folks were waiting on the elevator. I said, I'm walking. I'll be up there in a minute.
So let's go one at a time, or one player at a time. And Easton, since you were there, I'm going to let you take the bulk of this conversation. But Tony Pollard, he gets up there, talks about how, growing up in Memphis, which I relate to, growing up in Memphis, he followed the Tennessee Titans, Chris Johnson. I don't know if he got asked the question of what his favorite food was. I know. Big J journalism is dead if you're not going to ask everybody meaningless questions. But Tony Pollard,
did you land a plane?
There you go. That's real questions that we need to know. And of course, the birds aren't real movement started in Memphis. So Tony Pollard that would have been a great question for Tony Pollard.
Sure.
But I mean, I get the sense that excitement was the buzzword throughout this thing, or vibes or immaculate or whatever. But that seems to be the buzzword, but nobody seems excited.
Yeah, it was a lot of what you expect from players signing to a team that's in a rebuilding phase where you hear the general platitudes of there's something special here, the energy in the building. And I do think those things are true. I don't think that they're just blowing smoke. This has been a theme since Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan have been the new faces of this organization. the air in the building at St. Thomas Sports Park is a little bit lighter. The vibe is a different one than when Mike Vrabel was around. Not necessarily a better one, but just a different situation. And while this team had a really rough 2023, there is a sense that that was them bottoming out and it is up from here. And I think these players are excited. They just told us in the most blah way possible, which, like, who cares? What else do you want them to say? Exactly on a day like today, I kind of think that these introductory pressers for guys that aren't like a Derrick Henry caliber veteran with like a big, long storied history, like, I think it's necessary, but you don't really gain a lot. And today we didn't really gain a lot.
Yeah, I mean, last year the pressers were A+, 6-11 season followed. D+, being generous. D+ pressers, carried heavily by Cheeto's presser. 11-6 on the way. That's where I stand.
That's how that is the math on that. That's how that works. Right.
Seasons are won in the presser. This is a good question. You may not even know what he looks like, but did you see Jerome Baker?
I'll be honest. I don't know what he looks like. So maybe I did on accident. But I have not put a face to that name yet.
There you go. No signings other than
I'm going to Google Jerome Baker now and see if in retrospect I recognized him.
There you go. Besides Nick Westbrook-Ikhine this morning, nobody has been signed. You put up a poll this morning about Nick Westbrook-Ikhine saying that you think that the pendulum has swung the other way.
It's a straw man. Officially, it's a straw man. Yes. It's a straw man argument at this point.
Explain the tweet and the poll and all that kind of stuff.
So everybody knows that Titans fans for the past 3-ish years, like, the narrative has been everybody hates Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. And for folks that are like sharps on this, like ahead of the curve, it's, well, you only hate him because he was forced into wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 at times responsibilities in these seasons where the wide receiver core was really, really hurt and he was forced up that depth chart. And you only hate him because he's playing out of his natural role where he's best fit at wide receiver 4, at wide receiver 5. So really, you hate the position he's put in. You don't hate the player. And that was the case for a while. I think a lot of fans just didn't realize that he's not bad at what he's supposed to be doing. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. But everyone's come around on that by now. It's a straw man argument at this point. And I realized this morning. I think our buddy Mike Herndon realized this morning, that it is no longer true to say most people aren't going to be happy that NWI has signed back with the Titans. Most folks want this guy to go away. He's a cockroach. You can't kill him. No, folks, I think just accept him for what he is now. And so we need to adjust accordingly, that NWI is a guy that folks appreciate for the role that he plays, which is a smaller one.
And I mean, not 492 votes, 92.1% say no, he gets too much hate.
That's strong.
And I have not changed my perception for the last couple of years. I agree. He is a good wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5. The problem is that he sucks the life. He is the kryptonite of other wide receivers ahead of him. He makes them weaker, and he somehow always finds a way to be wide receiver 2.
Right.
And I just don't want to take that risk. Call it bad juju, call it paranoia. I don't care what you call it.
He's a pox on their house, in your opinion. He's just...
Traylon Burks would have been an all-pro had it not been for Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Change my mind. If his presence was not on the team, his presence did not suck the talent away from Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, there you go. That's my take. That's my issue. Like, I'm not saying that he's bad. I'm not saying that people think that he's an all-pro when he's not. But the problem is that everybody's like, we have the same conversation the last 2 off seasons. Mm-hmm. We go in the off season saying, people are saying, no, it's okay. It's okay. He's just going to be your wide receiver 4. He'll be your wide receiver 5. And then he ends up not. So until he's like an unstoppable Prometheus, constantly stealing fire from the football gods. And until he has proven us that he is going to be a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, I don't want him near the team. And
okay, let me ask you this.
Well, I think it's a very reasonable ask.
Can I ask both of you this? Is it being a prisoner of the moment to say that it is shaping up for the 2024 Tennessee Titans wide receiver room to have the best quantity and quality of guys in front of him that they've had in the past 2 or 3 years? Like, he's got a lot of guys he's got to kill with his evil on the way to that wide receiver 3 or 2 role, right? assuming they probably draft a
I
guy as well.
I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about Traylon Burks, and maybe the team is feeling that him being the Tyler Boyd of the Cincinnati Bengals trio is going to help Traylon Burks a lot. That seems to be the only hope that everybody can cling to right now.
Right.
Is that, well, he played a lot of slot in college, so maybe this is what he's going to do then.
There's the upside.
And maybe that is true. But if you were asking me, based on production and historical context, what the current wide receiver depth chart looks like: DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, NWI, Traylon Burks, Kyle Phillips. That is where you're at. And then, of course, Mason Kinsey and Karis Jackson rounded out, at the end, because they're both still on the team. People got to remember. But that's kind of where I am at on NWI, because honestly, he has proven to be more reliable and better than Traylon Burks as a pro. And that's weird to say, and I don't like saying it, and that's scary. So you have to draft a wide receiver. At some point.
It definitely. I think I've just come to the revelation that NWI is truly the perfect allegory for the 5 stages of grief for Titans fans, where it seems like most fans in your poll today, Easton, have finally come to stage 5 acceptance. That is, it seems like Zach is still in between kind of, bargaining and depression on NWI right now. So like, I think we still have a ways to go, and that may include drafting a wide receiver, which I think you bring up a great point with signing NWI back. It still makes it very interesting to see when the Titans will draft a wide receiver, because like you said, that's already 5 that are on the roster between DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Traylon Burks, NWI, and Kyle Phillips. I mean, unless you're going to like kind of nip this trend in the bud and do a 7 wide receiver room, it seems like it's already getting pretty full with the signings they do. So it'll be really interesting to see.
They need to trade Malik Willis for some like Rondale Moore caliber wide receiver to add to the room, right? That's
everybody. I got like 5 jokes about they could trade him for Mason Kinsey, so they're just gonna fucking trade him to themselves. Like, you guys are all unoriginal, white people.
Go back to the drawing board on that, guys.
Yeah, give me a break. All these people with the Mason Kinsey joke. I mean, like, someone. I will say this. His name Ethan, Canadian Titans fan. Ethan. He said Terrace Marshall of
there you go,
from the Carolina Panthers. Don't tempt me with a good time, because I'd be all in. I'm a Terrace Marshall.
Just keep doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on that 2019 LSU team, right?
Anything that pushes other wide receivers that are currently on the roster down, that are not named Calvin Ridley, is what I am here for. I don't care if that's draft, don't care if that's free agency. That's what I'm here for. And speaking of Calvin Ridley, he completely changes everything for this team. And you guys came up with the phrasing for that, and I really applaud you guys. I really like it. So, Easton, what does this give us? One example of what this changes for you?
Well, where my mind went immediately when they made this decision is that it is a big step forward for the Titans in their free agency process in order to get to the ultimate goal of where you want to be in the draft. And let me explain, like, the way that you want to approach free agency, or at least my philosophy, and I think a lot of folks see it this way as well, is free agency is where you address your needs in order to set yourself up for reaching the draft and being able to go with the best player available at each position. Because when you're having to, pigeonhole each selection in round 1, we really need to get this kind of player. We really need to get this position in round 2. You're having to reach more. You're having to pass up on better players in general because they don't fit the need that you have. And so the discussion before Calvin Ridley joined the Titans was, man, this team's pretty locked in. You'd imagine round 1, round 2, it's going to be receiver and O-line in some order. That's what this team's got to do. And that was exciting because there's a lot of good receivers and a lot of good offensive linemen in this draft class. But in general, you don't really want to be in that position, right? You want to be able to go with the best players available, regardless of what you need, because that's the give you the best expected value plus value down the road. With this guy on the roster now, Calvin Ridley does a couple of things for them. One, it makes, and I think you were talking about this on a football show yesterday, or excuse me, Football and Other F Words yesterday. It makes that 38th pick, the second round pick for the Titans, really a mystery selection at this point. Like, they could go in any direction, one would imagine. It still feels like tackle has to be addressed in round 1. And that's the I think the reasonable thinking at this point. But that second round pick could be best player available on defense. It could be somewhere else on the offensive side of the ball. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best receiver. And it also changes if they do still draft a receiver, the way that they have to look at this group. If you were doing mock drafts before the Calvin Ridley signing and trying to find a second round receiver for this team, not only is the second round group of receivers kind of questionable, but you would get there and there'd be some of the best options, at least in my opinion, guys that weren't necessarily what the Titans needed because they were in need of a true X boundary receiver, which they now have in Calvin Ridley. And so you'd have to reach for a guy like Xavier Legette. You'd have to reach and go after a Malachi Corley or something that just isn't necessarily great value at 38. Well, now you're not having to pass over at 38 necessarily. If you're entranced by a Roman Wilson, if you're entranced by a Xavier Xavier Worthy, like those kind of smaller guys that could instead be okay. Maybe they're the heir apparent to DeAndre Hopkins when he moves on. You can go with the best receiver, regardless of the kind of role they're going to play on an offense, because you're no longer desperately in need for that X.
Yeah, I will have to say, the strategy of this whole offseason has been a kind of a mystery anyway. You knew they had to reload, right? You knew that they have to get players and they have to sign players, but you didn't really know what kind of players, how much they were really going to spend, because they're talking about slow playing it. They're going to be smart with their money. And then you hear people say they're going to be aggressive or fairly aggressive. And you just didn't really know what to expect. And it's been kind of a roller coaster for fans because they live and die by every signing. As soon as a new signing happens, they forget the other signing. So like, as soon as I think it was Lloyd Cushenberry was the first announced signing, if I remember correctly, and then Cheeto, and then Kenneth Murray. As soon as like Kenneth Murray was signed, they forgot about everybody else. And as soon as Sadiq Charles was signed, they forgot about everybody else. So like
Nick Folk was signed like 10 seconds after they signed Calvin Ridley, and everybody forgot.
Yeah. And so to me, it's just like, we don't know really what to expect, but we can't. I tell you what, and this is something that I've been saying all Pollard was the first one. What I've been saying too is true is that this is a totally new Titans, and this is the Titans that they want, that Rand Carthon, I think, wanted to be last year, and he wasn't allowed to be. And now you're seeing what I guess, unchained, unhinged, freedom roaming, wild gunslinger Rand Carthon is right now. And he is like, it's the wild, wild west of the Titans offseason. You don't really know what to expect. And, they were like ancillarily linked to Calvin Ridley. But as it went on, you never heard the Titans were linked. Then all of a sudden they swoop in at the last minute and grab Calvin Ridley. And it was initially reported it was $50 million fully guaranteed, but it doesn't seem like that is the correct wording from Spotrac, and everybody else just calls it guaranteed. They don't call it fully guaranteed. So we'll see what that is, but they were aggressive to get him, and they were quiet about it. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen coming out of that building right now with Vrabel's mouthpiece, Diana Rossini. She's kind of like grasping at straws constantly. It's like an exciting thing. And listen, I'm not going as crazy as Mike is. Mike has said that like that was a major needle mover for him. Like basically Calvin Ridley signing means they're going to the Super Bowl. But I am at least willing to give the Titans credit that we don't really know what free agency is left for them. They still could sign Tyron Smith. We know Mekhi Becton has the Bengals today, but 2 other meetings lined up after the Bengals. Sometimes you don't get to those meetings, but I would assume the Titans are one of those meetings. Jerome Baker's coming in today. Chase Young's coming in today. Or Jerome Baker, I think, is tomorrow. Chase Young is today. Yeah, I think Jerome Baker's Friday, Chase Young today. We know they've been tied to Eric Armstead. We know that there has been some interest in DJ Reader, who may not leave the Lions today. But they are still at Justin Simmons, Marcus May. They are still interested in all of these big name players, so that even after spending money on Calvin Ridley, that lets you know this is going to be a pretty solid free agency class already. It's going to look better and get better. But then there's the draft on top of that. Like the free agency, I have not been too terribly disappointed that they've missed out on other players, except for Patrick Queen. That's the only player that felt like, well, that's a really reasonable contract. I'm really surprised they didn't really overshoot it. But everybody else that left or got paid elsewhere, I'm kind of glad they didn't pay that money, because you may not have gotten Calvin Ridley. You may have, who knows what Vin Marino and Chad Breeder.
You didn't want to give Aziz that contract? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I did not. And you know me, I was Aziz's biggest supporter out of everybody, but I'm not giving a large contract like that.
JT, what do you think?
Well, I just think that now, like you said, the 38th pick is just kind of up for grabs, and it's now making me realize that I'm going to have to go back now and look at some of that edge and D-line tape now that I once thought I didn't really have to look at. Now at 38, there's so many possibilities there.
Wait a minute, JT, are you telling me Zach's going to have to tune in to the Hot Read Podcast top 10 list of each position later on in the draft process?
He might have to, I think, because
his favorite series that we do.
Top 10 lists. Love top 10 lists.
Biggest hater for no reason on the top 10 lists.
Now thinking about, well, could they go and maybe go best player available there and take, if Chop Robinson is still on the board there, or a Chris Braswell, or fill in a position of need there. Heck, they could even, if some of those linebackers are there, the top two who are kind of far and away better than the rest of the class, it certainly would not be the most sexiest draft here if they took a Joe Alt and then went linebacker with a Peyton Willis, or the one out of Texas A&M, I forget his name.
Cooper.
Edgerrin Cooper. Taking him there, it certainly isn't very exciting or sexy, but it does fill a need there, and I think that is not something that can be taken off the table at this moment.
Can I play devil's advocate on two things real quick and ask you guys a question? One is a joke, but one is not. I do think that this raises some serious questions, fellas, about the Titans in 2022 not being willing to pay AJ Brown $100 million on a contract. And then in 2024, they give 92 or whatever they did to Calvin Ridley. What were they possibly thinking there? I mean, everybody knows that Ran Carthon and John Robinson have been working in unison on all contract decisions since 2016. And so he was responsible then as he is responsible now.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that, I don't know how you can have such drastic and such quick, drastic changes in philosophy from 2022 to 2024. Right. I mean, that is
like they
wild.
Fired their GM and their head coach since then or something. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm going to put my fist through a window.
Yeah. What's funny to me is that, like, I don't understand why everybody's really hating on this contract without even knowing anything about this contract. Because do you guys remember when they traded and got Calvin Ridley, the Jacksonville Jaguars did? They were applauded as the fucking genius savants of America. Like, they should have got
huge
the Nobel
Peace
Prize.
Crazy sharp play. Yeah, 100%.
And the problem is that everybody else hyped them up like they want to do. They love to hype the Jaguars. They love to hype the Colts. They love to hype other things, but they hyped it up in their head, especially fantasy football people, that Calvin Ridley was going to be an unstoppable force. Conveniently forgetting that he hasn't played football in 1.5 years, which is ridiculous. And now it's like, well, the best wide receiver on the market got wide receiver market money. We don't understand. So this is an awful trade. But I'll tell you what, if the Eagles had done it, if other teams had done it, they would be getting flowers thrown at their feet. Oh, what a great trade. And that just goes to show why you should not care what national media thinks, and you should just stick to shows like the Hot Read Podcast, Football Show, and Football and Other F Words.
And I've heard folks say, well, yeah, of course, the Chiefs and the Eagles and the Bills, if they did it, they'd be applauded because they're teams that are all in now. They're trying to win now. Sure, okay, that's fine. Let's take another team that's in a rebuilding phase like the Titans. If the Commanders had gone out and made this move for Calvin Ridley, the narrative would have been, man, love it. Getting weapons for Drake May or Jaden Daniels. They're going to come in and be in the cushiest situation possible. They're going to have as much help around them. Love that. Preparing for your rookie quarterback. As if Will Levis is not a player coming into his first full year as a starter who could benefit from the exact same thing. So it's completely and utterly ridiculous. So let me actually put devil's advocate on one thing here. I'm thinking back to your shows, Zach, our shows 2, 3, 4 weeks ago before free agency starts. talking about, man, the Titans have so much money to spend. Man, it historically is kind of dangerous to have so much money to spend, right? You look at the New Englands and the Jacksonvilles of recent years where you win free agency, you spend $100 billion on the sexiest names out there. And then 1, 2, 3 years later, you realize it was a disaster. You overpaid for guys. You're in cap hell because of contract, blah, 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 all these things. You realize it was a cautionary tale. And so talking about how, you don't necessarily want to win free agency. It's not a great idea. The Titans have $75 million to spend, but they shouldn't necessarily spend all of it in one free agency. Like, make smart moves. And they're out here, it's not like they're setting the world ablaze. They've made one really, really big move for a wide receiver. They've made one large offensive line move for a center. And then they've made 8 or 9 other smaller moves around them. Are we in that territory where you're starting to wonder if, I guess what I'm asking is, what is the difference between what they've done so far in free agency and the cautionary tale of trying to win free agency by spending all of your money on 100 players?
I think, to me, it's because we know that they are being realistic about their season, right? Okay. They have told us that they think that this is a 2 or 3 year rebuild. And sure, It may not look like they feel that way, but like Logan says, 10 players for $221 million so far. That sounds like a lot, but there are teams out there that have 3 players for $221 million. So they are.
Carolina Panthers spent $100 million on 2 guards. Like,
right?
There's different
like
ways to go
that.
about
To me, there you go. That is a perfect example, JT, of that is the Jacksonville Jaguar way. Is spending a bunch of money on 2 players, while the Tennessee Titans are doing something that's smart where they're spending it on 10 players right now. And that's just the additional, that's all the contracts, like 3 for $231. And of course, that is the Kirk Cousins. And listen, the Falcons were technically a quarterback away from winning their division last year. And they've gone and get to Darnell Mooney. They traded away their other quarterback to get Rondale Moore. So they have less holes to fill, but they're spending more money on those holes. The Tennessee Titans have many, many holes to fill and still a lot to go, but they were also not spending a lot of cash last year. You got to remember, they were like the bottom 3 or bottom 4 in cash spent in 2022. They'll be much higher this year. The Jaguars and the Browns are always near the top. Right. And so regardless of wins, regardless of past history, they've always been near the top. So I think that is the big key difference, is that they are signing, 3 years. Let's see. I think the shortest contract of the big names has been Kenneth Murray at 2. Everybody else has been 3 or 4 years. All the money that the Texans are spending are been largely 2-year contracts, and they've been big money 2-year contracts. And that just shows you the different stages that you're going to be in. But these moves that they're making do allow the Tennessee Titans to be pretty competitive. I think a lot more competitive than we have initially thought heading into 2024 so far.
Well, let's talk about that, because
does that answer your question?
It does, but I think it's a great segue to what I want to talk about, where you mentioned they are being honest with us and with themselves about what their season is going to look like. And 2 points that I think are important to make on that front. One, going back to, 3 days ago, when the Texans were making a ton of moves and everybody was like, yo, the Texans have got to chill. Like, they are signing everybody. It's when they ultimately signed Danielle Hunter and put that defensive line together, and you're realizing, holy cow, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. and these guys that they got up front now, they're going to be absolutely terrifying to face. A lot of Titans fans were in my comments, and I'm sure they were in y'all's comments, like, why are the Titans not doing this? They also have a quarterback going into their second year. They also have a ton of money to spend, a little bit more than the Texans had. Why are they not going in on this year like the Texans are? And I think it's a fair question on the surface. There are 2 big differences, right? Number one is that it's pretty obvious to me, and I have belief in Will Levis to prove himself to be a franchise quarterback this season. I think that's what he's going to do. But he's not proven himself yet to be that kind of all-in, push the chips to the middle of the table player like CJ Stroud is. That's number one. Number 2, the Texans are in a very different stage of their rebuilding process, their team-building cycle. They are ahead of the Titans' schedule. Not to any fault of the Titans. Well, you could argue that the Titans should have started last season before the season started, but it's the reality of the situation now. The Titans are in year 1 of a tear-down rebuild. The Texans are in at least year 2, arguably year 3 of getting draft capital, clearing the books, getting a bunch of money, setting themselves up for the future, and they now have an all-in style rookie quarterback contract that they're trying to cash in on for the next 2 to 3 years. That's very different than where the Titans are. And that brings me to my second point. Where are the Titans? I think that folks, I'm seeing a lot of, and this is what I want to ask both of you, if you're seeing this as well. I think a lot of people are misunderstanding what the primary goal for Tennessee is this season, in the sense that being competitive isn't actually objective number one, right? Their prime, at least in my opinion, maybe you can push back on this, but I think their number one goal this season with the bullet is find out if Will Levis is the guy. You have to, and you will, end the 2024 season with the answer, is Will Levis the future of this franchise or is he not? That's the number one goal. And so when you see folks, for example, last night, angry about giving Calvin Ridley as much money as they did because, well, they've got a million holes everywhere else on the team. What's the deal? You know, the defense has 3 or 4 different positions. You need starters at still. Offensively, what's the offensive line? All of these things. Why are they addressing wide receiver and presumably offensive line in the draft so heavily? And my point is, folks need to look at this Titans season through 3 lenses in this order. Lens number 1, priority number 1, find out if Will Levis is the guy. Priority number 2, set yourselves up as a franchise for the future 2 to 5 years. Like, that's the window they're looking at right now. And then priority number 3 on down the list is compete in 2024. I think folks are missing the fact that if you need to spend more resources this offseason on receiver and tackle in order to set Will Levis up to have as fair a situation as possible to prove whether he is or is not the quarterback of the future, and that means the defense is going to let up 27, 32 points per game, and you're going to lose some games because you had deficiencies elsewhere on the roster. That's okay, because that's not the primary objective, in my opinion.
I push back a little bit, or maybe I want to adjust your words.
Okay.
If you're correct. Your first 2 things are Will Levis setting up for sustained success.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what you're trying to do. You got to remember, people got to keep in mind, the Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars have spent many years in a row drafting in the top of the draft, chasing what they have now, maybe more for the Texans, less of the Jaguars, but a franchise built up for sustained success. And when you can do that and set yourself up like that, you are able to do stuff, but it took them 4 to 5 years to get there.
Mm-hmm.
The Tennessee Titans don't have to wait that long because of how the roster was kind of set up beforehand. You had Jeffrey Simmons. You already have DeAndre Hopkins now, but you had a few young players to build around, including Will Levis. They just haven't hit that upper echelon yet. But I will say this. Will Levis and building the roster through the draft, through free agency for sustained success, those things lead to being competitive. So it's like, yes, they're competitive. Maybe competitive is not like on top of mind, but technically those 2 things, if those are successful, the result is you're a competitive football team. So
yes,
I think it's kind of both. I call it, they're in the midst of a competitive rebuild. They're trying to rebuild to be competitive on the fly. And that happens all the time in the NFL, but they're also doing it in a way where they're not looking to win a Super Bowl. That's just kind of like, hey, if we make it to the Super Bowl, everything hit 100%. Kenneth Murray was an all-pro. Lloyd Cushenberry never allowed a sack. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins stayed healthy. The rookies came in and they were fantastic. You know, all this stuff. That's all great. But what they're looking for is to take modest jumps and hope to capitalize on it in a way that shows that they're trending in the right direction, because they're going to, I would say Amy Adams Strunk is okay with the direction that they're going, which is a competitive rebuild.
Right.
But you never know what an owner is going to change their mind on at some point through the season if results are not seen on the field. However, it's do or die. Like Trey, right before we went on the air, Trey put out an article on stackinginbox.com. The clock is ticking on Will Levis. The clock starts now for Will Levis. And there is no excuses. They're doing everything right now and what we think is going to happen in the future in the draft and rest of free agency to not give Will Levis any excuses. And I'm not saying he's a guy that needs excuses, but they're in a sense, they're also trying to give that to the fans. The fans don't have any excuse to coddle and protect Will Levis, right?
It's to have no doubt at the end of the year.
Unless everybody around him gets injured. But even if he gets injured, that provides doubt for his future and his viability as a Tennessee Titan franchise quarterback, because he's gotten hurt almost every year dating back to his college days.
Sure.
So to me, the timeline is like right now. This is where you find out this year whether Will Levis is on the right trajectory or not for your franchise, and you're 100% correct. And Calvin Ridley gives you him and DeAndre Hopkins and whatever you add in the draft or the rest of free agency gives you the best way or the best path to figuring out that answer.
Right.
Yeah, I think really it's the Will Levis experiment, right? It's the quarterback experiment that you are kind of alluding to there, that the clock is ticking. The experiment starts now, and the variable of this experiment is Will Levis or whatever quarterback you would put in there. And I think the three biggest moves, at least on offense, with Tony Pollard to kind of create that style of offense that Brian Callahan wants to create with having that kind of two-headed monster tandem between him and Tyjae Spears, bringing in a nice centerpiece in Lloyd Cushenberry to be that guy that can communicate with the offensive line that they maybe haven't had in a while, and then bringing in Calvin Ridley to not only complement DeAndre Hopkins, but to maybe be that guy going forward for the next 2 years. I think with those three guys and the contracts that they're on, where it really is 2 years, and then the third year is more of an option and kind of gives them some more possibilities down the road. It is the control for Will Levis, so that they know that this is what they want to build. The variable, let's see if this works, is with Will Levis. And then if that's not, if that doesn't work out, okay, the next guy, we fit him into this system that we want to do, and then we restart the experiment from there. So I think that's really what those offensive pieces to me look like, is that it is creating this mold. Let's fit the quarterback into it. If it works, it works. If not, we know what we need to go for from there. And I think that's what this year is.
I think the best way to put it is that they're in a competitive rebuild, but they are building around the quarterback, Will Levis. They're building it around him. And if he fails, any other quarterback that they want later on will step into better surroundings than they would have had if they were not building around the quarterback.
Okay, but Zach, we don't have to spend a long time on this, but this brings up a really interesting thing that I have seen from more than one person on social media in the past 2 days. I have been informed by a couple of people now that if Will Levis does not work out, this current regime is done. And I think that's unbelievably stupid. It's centered around the idea that I'm hearing, and I'm trying my best to set up the argument, even though I disagree with it, is that generally speaking, a GM gets one swing of the bat on drafting their quarterback. And typically that's you say a highly drafted quarterback, usually a first round quarterback. And while Will Levis was not a first round quarterback, he was the 33rd overall pick, right? Basically a first round pick, and a guy that the Titans seemingly were willing to trade back into the first round to draft in the first round. And so this idea that Ran Carthon, this is his white whale, he lives and dies by the kid that he has at quarterback. I don't think that there's anything to indicate that's the case, because one, again, this is not drafting Anthony Richardson at 4 overall. This is not drafting CJ Stroud at 2 and then trading up and getting Will Anderson at 3. You're not selling the farm in that same way to get this guy. Yes, the Titans had to trade up for him again in the second round. I don't think that Ran Carthon or Brian Callahan's jobs are inextricably tied to the success of Will Levis. I think that he could prove himself to be a big failure this year, and the entire coaching staff and front office pretty much stays the same, and they go get a different guy. Is that crazy?
That's where I'm at. If it's what they choose to do after the offseason, would affect my opinion on that. Bingo. Is that if they see him visibly struggle in all year and he does not make the leap that he needs to make, they're doing everything that they want to do with Joe Burrow. They're giving him a center. They got him a left guard. You would assume Daniel Brunskill's back, but they are probably going to add more starting pieces on the offensive line. DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Chig Okonkwo, Josh Wiley. likely another tight end in that mix, Tyjae Spears, and Tony Pollard in the backfield. You got a lot of outlets. They're going to give him all the responsibility. They're going to get his input, right? They're going to involve him in the game planning. They're going to involve him in some of the plays and the play calling, not really the play calling, but the play designs and all this kind of stuff. They're giving him all this responsibility. And if he sinks instead of swim, and they choose to keep him after this year, and after he sinks, they're going down with the ship. They're all three going down together.
Yep.
But if he sinks and they talk to Miss Amy and listen, obviously Amy Adams Strunk, Brian Callahan, and Rand Carthon are going to have a lot of conversations together during the season. If they end up all having these conversations during the season where it's like, well, listen, Will Levis is not looking good. Apparently it was an owner-inspired pick. Some people could have been a Vrabel pick. We don't know. We don't know who really is involved in that initial pick. But if they choose to stay with him or choose to move on, it's going to be because all three of these people had conversations that he's just not the guy, and we're going to have to figure something out because we've tried everything. We gave him all this talent. I gave him all this responsibility. I don't know what to do, and I've worked with all kinds of quarterbacks in my life. You know, this would be Brian Callahan, obviously. This guy just doesn't have it. But I don't think that's going to be the outcome. But to answer your question, I agree. But it depends on their decision after the offseason.
Yeah, I would. I would agree with that. I think this is the year for him. But obviously, I would agree with you guys as well. It's not tied down to him because I don't think how you could have Brian Callahan be tied down to Will Levis because he wasn't in the building. I think there is more merit to what you're saying, that it may have been a pick from either the owner or someone who wasn't here. So I don't even know how really Rand Carthon could be kind of at fault either. But I agree that if they choose after this year to tie themselves to that as well, that's where you start to question where they're going with it.
Well, it's not like he was a perfect quarterback prospect either. I mean, if he was a perfect quarterback prospect, you would have. And yes, they said they tried to move back up into the first round, or those were the rumors or whatever. But you would have drafted him at 11th overall, technically. I mean, you had a guard, and potentially Zay Flowers, if all rumors are to believe, higher than what you thought a franchise quarterback should be. So there wasn't. You knew the flaws were there, that there was a high risk, high reward chance that this was either going to work out like gangbusters or is going to work out like a bust. And I think as long as everybody's just being realistic and honest with each other, which hopefully now that can happen. So hopefully there is this corporate culture where honesty is allowed and realistic expectations can be set, that this won't be a real issue, because hopefully Will Levis works out, or B, everybody understands if he doesn't work out, we tried everything, this ain't the guy.
So we're going to spend the next 30 minutes on Jack Gibbens. Titans tendered unrestricted free agent Jack Gibbens for their middle linebacker position. But in all seriousness, where do we want to take this conversation? Do we want to talk about what they do with the offensive line? Do we want to talk about the prospect of L'Jarius Sneed potentially being a change as a result of the Calvin Ridley signing? Where do we want to go?
Let's start with the offensive line, because I think that's now the focal point for everybody that's in the fan base. Every analyst is going to be, well, what are you going to do on the offensive line? They still have Andre Dillard on contract, and I know everybody's probably really upset at that, but they're going to have to figure out. Obviously, Becton, Smith are still out there. Jonah Williams got overpaid by recently, and I think it was by the Cardinals. I can't remember now.
Yes, the Cardinals.
Yeah. So glad they took him off the market. But they have to find, to me, they have to get someone on the offensive line in free agency, and they have to still attack it during the draft. So they have to figure out the offensive line, because that's the missing piece, right? You can give your quarterback all these weapons, but he's an injury away, and he's pretty easy to get injured from not being able to do anything if you don't have a good offensive line. And I do love Bill Callahan. I am not banking on Bill Callahan being the god of gods and being able to turn Andre Dillard and NPF and Dylan Radins into anything other than replacement level starters. So I need to see what they do next. And I think offensive line is if they don't go Joe Alt number 7, I'd be very surprised. And we'll talk about our draft strategies and everything, because I know you got a good aggressive, you have an aggressive stance on a certain thing, but that is the next thing. That's the next step. You got your wide receiver. I'm not saying you're going to find your premier left tackle or your premier right tackle, but you got to find a tackle in free agency.
Yeah, Bill Callahan may be a proverbial miracle worker, but he is not a literal miracle worker. And so that's the question. You say they have to go and find somebody in free agency. Just to be super crystal clear on that, you mean they need to go find somebody that can start at tackle, because you don't see a world in which they can roll with an MPF, a Dylan Radins, and Andre Dillard already on the roster, or potentially still on the roster as one of their 2 tackle positions next year.
I am all about if you have the chance to upgrade, you should upgrade, and they have the chance to upgrade. Whether that's putting Becton at right tackle or maybe Tyron Smith at right tackle, because they're not really left tackle ready. I mean, Tyron Smith has played left tackle his whole life, but he's getting older, so sometimes you can mask that over on the right side or by a position switch, kind of like taking a corner from safety. Maybe Becton is better suited for right tackle, but I'm sure he's going to want to be a left tackle. But you have to find someone better than the guys that are currently on the roster. And I will say this, they tried, right? I mean, Ramon Foster said they were in on Chuck Okorafor, who ended up going back to the I think he ended up going to the Steelers. Free agency is just wiped.
He went somewhere. There's a lot of players.
Yeah, but that's a guy that, like a Chris Hubbard, could start and you not have to worry about it, but he would start on the right side. That tells you what they think about these guys. I mean, they bring in Sadiq Charles because they're bringing in competition to either push them to be better or push them out. So that's where you're at right now, is that they have to find better offensive line players than what they have currently on the roster, because I would be very, very shocked if they think that Dylan Radins, NPF, Jalen Duncan, Andre Dillard, or even our boy John Ojukwu, any of these guys are starters on day one.
Well, as Tony says, Tyron Smith left guard, Skoronski left tackle. You got one side solved. It's not a big deal.
Well, they've already said it's Skoronski's guards, and that doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so let me ask you this, and I seriously doubt this is going to be the case, but if it were to happen, and they just double down, round 1, Joe Alt, round 2, Kingsley Sumatea, Patrick Paul.
Man, you got me. You have me hooked. I'm hooked.
So you're in on that? I mean, I'm not. Are you opposed to 2 rookie starting? Didn't the Seahawks just recently do this, where they had 2 starting rookie tackles, and it actually kind of worked out for them?
I don't know, but I know the Kansas City Chiefs went to the Super Bowl with like 2 or 3 offensive linemen. I think they were rookies, right? I mean, that first year, whenever Trey Smith got drafted, they had like 3 or 4 new offensive linemen. I think 2 or 3 of them were rookies. Right. So I'm all in. Like here's my dream scenario, because let's talk the draft, because that ties into our offensive line. My dream scenario is now Alt at 7, and I'm not going to turn down Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors, but Alt at 7, Christian Jones in the 4th round. Let's ride. Super Bowl bound, baby. We're going to get multiple Super Bowls out of those 2 guys, because like, to me, you got Christian Jones on the right.
15-year starters, baby.
Let's do it, man. I'm in. Like, listen, if you want to go, if you want to go Patrick Paul, Kingsley Suamatea, or at the right side in the round 2, at right tackle, I'm in. I'm not going to really care about. But my preferred scenario is Joe Alt there, Christian Jones in the 4th, and then listen, trade that 2nd round pick and move down a few spots, pick you up a 3rd or an extra 4th in this draft, and you're cooking. And I know you said last night, Calvin Ridley has changed things for you in that you are aggressively pro trade back at number 7.
I have never been more trade back in my life than I am now. And it's for this reason. And this was not something, and folks were saying, well, let's Give it a couple days. You're saying that because of Calvin Ridley. No, I am on the record having been pro this before Calvin Ridley was brought into the team. And here's the reason why. I felt that with the first round pick the Titans have at 7, if they wanted a first round receiver, under no circumstances should they trade down. They need to get one of the top 3 guys. But if they wanted a first round tackle, it would be doable to move back to 12, 13, 14, 15 in that 10 to 15 range, pick up a third round pick, pick up a second, and give away, compensate with a late round pick of your own. Give up get a future third, something along those lines. Get a little extra capital this year or next. Move back, because I don't think I said this on Twitter the other day. I don't think the drop off from Joe Alt to the next 4 or 5 tackles is nearly as big as folks want to make it out to be. I think Amarius Mims, J.C. Latham, Ola Fashanu, who am I missing? Talise
Fuaga.
Talise Fuaga.
You can put Troy Fontenot out there.
And that's
as well.
And that's the 5th one. I think that those
anybody but Tyler Guyton.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that there's your tier break. I think those 6 guys, if you include Joe Alt, those are the top tackles. And I do think Alt is the one. Don't get me wrong. I don't think the drop off is as dramatic as you think it is. And a lot of folks would say, well, but you need a left tackle, right? And the top 2 guys are the left tackles. You got to get Alt or Fashanu. First of all, can we talk a little bit about how in 2024 it's not? Maybe you disagree. I don't think it's really a thing anymore that you have to prioritize left tackle when you need both tackles. I think that the value of a left tackle is like 10, 15% more than that of a right tackle in 2024 for a couple of reasons. One, you need both tackles. Like, you can't have 2 bad tackles. It's not that they have a need on the left side. No, my friend, they have a need on both sides. So if you're going to get a great guy somewhere, that's awesome. Would it be better a little bit on the left side? Yes, but it's not as much as it used to be, because in 2024, defenses send their premier pass rushers on both sides of the ball, or both sides of the line, pretty agnostically. It used to be the case that the left side, and here's where it still is a thing, right? When you get a right-handed quarterback, that still is their blind side. There still is an element of, it helps to know that the guy you don't see coming all the time is blocked up pretty well. That's what gives left side the edge still. But it used to be the case the defenses would send you would send your guy. The Max Crosby on your team is coming on the left side every day, all day. That's not the case anymore, man. Nick Bosa is flipping back and forth every single game. Max Crosby is flipping back and forth every single game. It's not the case anymore that side is attacked at an uneven rate as compared to the right side. So I don't mind the idea of getting a right tackle. I also think it is true that why do folks believe that tackles are legally bound to play in the NFL the side that they most played in college, right? Like, J.C. Latham would have been a left tackle in college, and a very good left tackle in college, if it were not for Evan Neal when he showed up to Alabama, right? Evan Neal was there. He slotted it on the right side because Evan Neal was on the left, and he didn't move over because at that point, he was going to go to the draft. We'll just keep him on the right side. We'll get our left tackle of the future. That was what Bama was doing. He's a big fella. He's got all the traits necessary to make that switch. Is it difficult? Yes. Switching sides is not easy. Is it impossible? No, it is not. And we've seen it happen from left to right in recent years. I find it so funny that when you propose, well, left tackle is moving to the right side, everybody's like, yeah, sure, no problem. But heaven forbid you propose a right tackle move to the left side. It's impossible. It's Pan's Labyrinth. You can't do it. It's a puzzle that cannot be solved. That's just not true.
Fully agree. I fully agree with everything you just said. Talise Fuaga, J.C. Latham, to me, can be left tackles at the NFL. I agree with you. I think Joe Alt. I think here's the thing. Joe Alt is a blue chip talent.
I agree.
Okay. And Joe Alt with Bill Callahan would probably get you multiple all pros, Pro Bowls, whatever you want. Mm-hmm. But you can probably get multiple Pro Bowls with Bill Callahan, Talise Fuaga. You can probably get multiple Pro Bowls with these other guys that you're talking about the next year. May not get all pros, but then you're just talking about an award, right? Like, what's the sack difference between the guy who gets Pro Bowl and the guy who gets all pro?
2.
You can only get one all pro left tackle in, right? I mean, there's like Maybe you'll just get a bunch of second team all pros. I don't know. Is that such a bad thing?
Oh no!
If you're picking up extra draft capital,
Right.
like that's the thing, right? You left tackles. There's one left tackle Pro Bowler or All Pro guy, right?
Mhm.
I mean, there's not two. So only one guy can get. Are we saying that one guy this year is the only good left tackle in the NFL? I mean, like we got to be realistic here,
right?
So to me, I'm with you. If I have been pro trade back, I recently it's like Rome Odunze only at number 1, and I don't really like coming off of that because I really like Rome Odunze, and I would like destroy this entire house that I am living in if it was Rome Odunze,
You would need to call in
Calvin
the Kingston
Ridley,
group
DeAndre Hopkins.
ASAP.
Like if it's those 3 guys,
Yeah,
I would be like, there's no way Will Levis can fail. We are scoring 40 points. We may be losing games 48-52. I don't know, but we are scoring some fucking points, and I'm gonna be happy. But I think the smart thing to do, I think the smartest strategy, I think this is the best way to look at it. You can have your preferred strategy. You can have your favorite player. You can have your favorite thing to do at number 7. But I think the smart strategy for the Tennessee Titans is to trade back a few and drop a few extra picks, pick up some extra picks, both this year's draft and maybe even next year's draft. But you could probably pick up 2 picks in this year's draft just by trading back a few spots because people are going to want the quarterbacks and they're going to pay a premium for them. And so to me, I think that trading back is the smartest strategy out of the 3. I think the next smart strategy is just to stick and pick and take Joe Alt if he's there. Even a trade back if Joe Alt's there is still the smartest strategy. And I think the third, it's not the smartest strategy at all, is to take another wide receiver.
Okay.
I mean, it's maybe not the smartest strategy and the best use of resources, but I think it's the third best, but it's the most exciting. Let me say this. The most exciting strategy, my favorite strategy of all time would be for them to just go Rome Odunze.
It's not safe for work.
I mean, it also it builds for the future. It's not like DeAndre Hopkins most likely is not around. Like even though you have Calvin Ridley, next year you have Calvin Ridley, and then who? Like you're going to be in the same position.
Neighbors.
And with how deep
NWI,
this class is,
what are you talking about?
I mean, yeah, it's the inevitability, right?
It's Calvin and Nick Westbrook-Akina, and then we don't know who else.
I mean, it is the craziest. It's the most Mad Maxy style of building your team, right? Just to do firework shows the entire time. But I still,
the Bengals did it, right?
The Bengals somewhat did it as well. Yes.
All I'm saying is, if you do that, you better plan on throwing the ball 40 times a game because you got some mouths to feed, man. You can't be grounded and pounding no more.
I don't think they are either way, regardless of if they take that.
No, I agree, but like you need to hand the ball off like 9 times every game. That's what you're gonna have to do if you have all 3 of those receivers on the team.
The one thing I will push back on, in just coming back around to the 2 tackles thing, if you were to take a tackle in the first and then double up in the second, I think, and it kind of mixes with your point, I think the only way you would do that is if you trade down, because then like the only reason I would see them go tackle is if they start to, in the next week, really bring in some more defensive pieces. Because if you don't bring in a couple more of these defensive pieces and you go tackle, well, I mean, you're not taking a defensive player until the 4th round.
You better score 40 points a game because you're going to be scoring 40 points on every game.
I think it would be, and so far, what Rand Carthon and his team have done, I have really put trust in them to know what they need, and I think they know that they need a lot more help on defense. So I think I've been slowly talked into trading back down, whether in the second or in the first, getting some picks in the third, where there is so much good defensive depth between picks 60 and pick 109 or 106, wherever the Titans are there, that I think one of those 2 rounds there, whether it be the first round or the second round, they really have to think about trading back in one of those rounds and picking up a pick between pick 60 and pick 106, because the defensive depth there is just so good.
And here's my fever dream draft out. And go ahead, Zach, because I'm going to transition.
Well, I was just going to say, you're talking about building up the defense. The defense, it just took a little bit of a hit. Not the Tennessee Titans, but the free agents options out there is that Kendall Fuller signed a 2-year, $16.5 million deal with the Miami Dolphins. So a very, very reasonable deal that, again, there are ties with Kendall Fuller and someone on this Tennessee Titans staff, and they weren't in on him, supposedly. Maybe they were. But again, doesn't seem like that expensive a deal, and that's a deal that I feel like the Tennessee Titans should have gone on and still made, because they could put him across from Cheeto, and that solves a lot of your problems. So
I would agree. He was one of my. It was Chidobe Awuzie, Kendall Fuller were two of my top guys that I think they would be in on, specifically because, like you said, the Chris Harris connection there. That's another one from his time in Washington. So yeah, I'm with you on that one.
We've got, what is it, 6 weeks till the draft? 5 or 6 weeks, something like that. I can already tell you.
I'm just so glad it's not this week or next week. Like the combine and free agency together just like has wiped out all my time, my free time.
Yeah, we need a little time to breathe before the draft, and we have that. But I can go ahead and tell you with certainty right now, my favorite genre of mock draft from now until the draft, as long as L'Jarius Sneed is still kind of floating out there as a possibility for somebody to go and grab, is going to be the Titans trading back in the first. Go take the Broncos, for example. You go back to 14, I believe it is. Get the Broncos' 3rd round pick and a future 3rd, for example. A couple 3rds to move back a couple spots. At 14, you grab a Taliese Fuaga. You grab a J.C. Latham. You grab an Amarius Mims. You grab a Troy Fautanu. And then, and this is very much like living in the simulators too much. This is like, I need a lot of things to happen for this to happen. So don't bank on this, kind of fever dream. But if they were to then flip that 3rd and like their 6th or their 5th for L'Jarius Sneed, grab him, put Sneed, Chidobe Awuzie, and
McCreary.
McCreary. Yeah, I'm like, who's still on the team? Roger McCreary as that backfield. And you flip your 3rd and your 6th or 7th for it. Now you're cooking with gas. You go BPA defender elsewhere at the 2nd round, or you go with the top receiver. Like, you don't talk about Mike Herndon being like a needle mover. I think this team might compete now. I might start drinking the Kool-Aid at that point if that were to be the case, because that's the biggest thing for me defensively. They've addressed it a little bit, but really shoring up the secondary, adding another starting cornerback, adding at least one more starting safety. And we've seen a lot of these safeties come off the market. Like, it feels like they're kind of at a Justin Simmons or bust crossroads right now. If they were to get a top free agent that's really going to move the needle on the back end of the defense. So does the possibility of L'Jarius Sneed change for you at all with Ridley being in the building? That was another thing we had written down for this show. You know, before Ridley was on the team, it was a lot of, I don't know, man. Are you having to send a 2nd round pick for L'Jarius Sneed? And if so, where are you going to get your best receiver? Where are you going to get your best tackle? Like, you're running out of options. I don't know if I love sending a top 100 pick for top 50 pick for that guy. And now I feel like people are like, I don't know, man. Maybe send the pick for the guy. Has it changed your opinion in that way?
I was going to say real quick. I mean, if you're doing that, to your point, if you're competing now, if you do that, because not only are you trading the pick, you look at the Jalen Johnson contract, you're going to pay him $21 million on top of the guy that you just gave about $23 million a year for. So if you trade for L'Jarius Sneed and then give him that contract, you better be all in, because then you get into that territory where you are the winners of the offseason. This is where you might be in a little too far over your head, and that's where you get into cap trouble down the line. Like, if you do that, you are all in on Will Levis, and the experiment goes from can he work to he must work, I think, in the next couple of years. So that's what my stance is still on L'Jarius Sneed. I think that you don't have to do that, but if they do that, I think you better be all in.
Mm-hmm.
I am with you, because listen, we don't know who's going to be there in the 2nd round, but we all three have kind of talked about it a little bit. Is like the 2nd round is kind of a weird. It's at a weird point this year where I'm just kind of like, I don't really like any of the guys
I feel
that much. Now, listen, if I could trade my 38th pick, then I'm a little bit feeling pretty good, right? Like, if I could trade back in the 2nd round, pick up a 3rd, pick up a 4th as I trade back just a few spots. Okay, then I'm kind of feeling, I'm feeling pretty good about the 2nd round, because I picked up some extra value. So like that player plus that other draft pick makes me feel a little bit better. Like a Ricky Pearsall makes me feel a little bit better.
Sure.
And if I have a 3rd round pick lying around.
Mm-hmm.
So I would not be totally against going to get L'Jarius Sneed, but I do think it sends a totally different message than what they've been talking about. And maybe they just want to properly set expectations for once. And the action speaks louder than the words.
Right.
But I do like L'Jarius Sneed better than a Kamari Lassiter or a Darius Robinson or a Kingsley Suamatia.
Let me give the folks just a glimpse.
He's a proven commodity.
And I'm not going to cut you off for long, but let me just give folks kind of the rundown of what we're talking about, where the Titans are at 38. If you haven't done a lot of mock drafts, you're like, well, who are they talking about that they dislike? Here's the kind of guy you're thinking about. A Troy Franklin, receiver out of Oregon. TJ Tampa, cornerback out of Iowa. Mike Sainristril, cornerback out of Michigan. Chris Braswell, edge from Bama. Jordan Morgan, tackle from Arizona. Jatavian Sanders, tight end from Texas. Adisa Isaac, edge out of Penn State. Ennis Rakestraw, cornerback Missouri. Braden Fisk, D lineman of Florida State. That's the caliber of guy where you get with the Titans at 38, and you're like, that guy or a L'Jarius Sneed.
L'Jarius Sneed.
Big contract for Sneed, but I don't care.
But you got the maneuverability and flexibility to take on that contract without really having to worry. And listen, he's a little bit on the older side, but I mean, he's playing at a high level. And that's the thing is like, if he was a guy that was kind of trending downwards, it'd be different. To me, I feel like I would go for it, but I would need a pick in return. Like I would need their third round pick because they pick at the bottom of the third, right? So the bottom of the third is like in the 90s.
Something. Yeah.
So I mean, they're coming all the way up to 38 from the 90s, and they're getting a contract off the books that they clearly they right now he's not really on the trading block, right? From all reports, he technically has not been made officially available by the Kansas City
They're not
Chiefs.
shopping him, right?
But I will say this. I know from what I have heard, but let's say, here's what I'm going to say, because there's I think, I know, or I think. I think.
You nailed that, by the way. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I think
I know I feel.
Callahan really wants L'Jarius Sneed. That's how I will phrase it. Like, if I had to guess.
You think it's Brian?
I would say that Brian Callahan really wants L'Jarius Sneed. Now, what you do with that is of your own decision, but he does not have the only person that has final say is Rand Carthon. But the Calvin Ridley does open up a little bit more flexibility now. And that's what I heard. And that's what I have been thinking for a couple of days now about L'Jarius Sneed.
That's what you've been thinking yourself.
That's what I've been thinking. That's just what I've been thinking.
It's just
so I would say this, that if they were to trade for L'Jarius Sneed, I think it's a direct connection and reflection of the Calvin Ridley signing. I think it's a cause and effect. Mm-hmm. That's how I would put it. And I wouldn't be against it.
The thinking there, you can see how Callahan would get there. The biggest thing that he's been in this offseason is that you learn from the mistakes and the things that have beat you in the past. Well, one thing that has really stifled him, and he's had a back and forth with the Bengals, is against L'Jarius Sneed and that Kansas City defense. So getting a guy like that in the building to play for you, I makes sense to why a guy like Brian Callahan would probably be really excited about that.
And I think that it would say a lot about the trust that they have, or essentially it says a lot about the message that they're going to send. Are we L'Jarius Sneed, right? Because we talked about how Rand Carthon wanted to rebuild, Mike Vrabel wanted to reload and go for it.
Right.
What does L'Jarius Sneed's? You're technically reloading and trying to be a little bit more competitive than what the plan was. The Rand plan, the Chad Brinker plan was. And that's fine. I'm fine with that because you are still getting a premier corner to go with your secondary corner, and they're both going to be on relatively reasonable contracts. I think the Jalen Johnson was 5 years, 70-something million, if I'm not mistaken, which you can get out of it after 3. Okay, you get out of L'Jarius Sneed after 3 years. It's pretty good. Just don't restructure. The problem with the Tennessee Titans was they restructured everybody, instead of just cutting them. And that's what you got to do. You got to make sure you got to cut bait. That's why you have outs in contracts, to try to cut bait instead of trying to reload. And you got to recognize when those outs are. But I think that it's probably a little. I think it was dead in the water yesterday morning. I don't think that the L'Jarius Sneed trade yesterday morning was going to be a thing. It gained a lot of steam the night before free agency, but the day of free agency, Wednesday, I don't think it was going to really happen. But I would say now, I think the door is probably a little bit more open, and everybody inside the building is probably a little bit more open to the idea. But to be honest, I'm not expecting it, because I don't think that's the. I don't think L'Jarius Sneed fits the long-term plans of this franchise, if that makes sense.
Okay,
it's a lot of weird vomit to say that.
No, I see what you're saying, and so that leads me to ask the question. If we're assuming the Sneed trade is unlikely or is just not going to happen, which I would say is probably the case at this point, it may happen, but it's not something that we are expecting to happen.
I would have rather signed Kendall Fuller than trade for L'Jarius Sneed.
Okay, fair enough. What do we think the biggest? Obviously, tackle. That is the thing the Titans need to address in free agency, in the draft, somewhere. They need two of them. What's the biggest thing glaring for this team? Is it the cornerback position, or is it safety? Because I'm concerned about the safety position more than I feel like folks aren't talking about it enough, because it's, you hear the Titans are really in for a Justin Simmons, but you look at the rest of the market. If Simmons is not the guy, look at the draft. There's not really a starting caliber guy, like a ready-made guy to slot into that. I don't know what they're going to do at safety, man.
Well, I feel better about safety, because safety is such a position that doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things anymore. Corners matter more than safety. Safeties are like the running back of the defense. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at on. I mean, Elijah Molden, and you could put Elijah Molden at safety and go get Kayvon Wallace if he's still out there later on down the road, and be fine at safety and not have.
It scares me.
Big
I don't know.
Because Elijah Molden and Kayvon Wallace were good for the team last year, and they were both better than Kevin
and you still
Byard
have
now.
Amani Hooker as well. So I mean, you still have the depth there where you don't have that with like the cornerback position.
You don't have anybody that is the caliber of Danico Autry currently. And so to me, that guy that can play multiple positions, or even the guy that even if you turn Danico Autry and just make him a full-time, like, you got to have a nose tackle, and you got to have whatever you want to call Danico Autry. To me, those are big glaring holes. But the biggest glaring hole, in my opinion, because you don't have one starter at it currently, is linebacker. Like, that is you have to have someone, because people can white knight and hope all they want for Kenneth Murray. Now, I'm sure, he's a nice guy, and maybe he will rebound. That rarely happens in the NFL, that a guy for 4 years who was a below average starter for 4 years suddenly turns into something that he wasn't.
Hey, and to his credit, he essentially said it today. He gave a pretty honest assessment of his career so far. He said, like, listen, it's not been the storybook start for me that I wanted, but, I feel like I'm a player on the rise, and at least it still has that confidence. But yeah.
Yeah, you at least want a guy that has some confidence. I agree with that.
If he walked up there and like, guys,
don't have anybody.
I was surprised I got this contract too. I kind of blow. I don't know what the deal is. That would have been a problem.
Yeah, Aziz, the hole left by Aziz that he filled for two linebackers, right? He filled the role for David Long and I guess it was Dylan Cole the previous year, but for Zach Cunningham if you want. But he filled the role of linebacker for two spots. And now, right now, whoever you get is probably still likely going to have to fill the role for two spots. He's going to have to be a guy that can play 3 downs constantly. 1,000 snap guys, what you're looking for. Good luck at linebacker in finding that. And listen, Jerome Baker is great. I'd be all for Jerome Baker, but that guy, he's coming off an injury. Don't know what we're going to see out of Jerome Baker next year in 2024, but that is the biggest hole. Then I would go from there, other corner. Then I would go to defensive line, Danico Autry role, then safety. Like, safety is so far is the last.
I think you've changed my mind. So hang on, explain to folks that may not be aware. Like, it's not that he has no good tape out there. He's played some games where you're like, okay, I see the vision. But explain to folks why, even if you're getting the best version of him, you still desperately need another linebacker to do other things he can't.
Well, here's why. He's not
This
a
is
green
Kenneth
dot
Murray,
linebacker.
by the way. I didn't even mention his name.
Right?
Kenneth Murray.
Yeah. So Kenneth Murray is not your green dot linebacker.
Right.
And
why?
Typically teams have a green dot linebacker that rarely comes off the field. Your Roquan Smith, your Fred Warner, those guys that come off the field. Tennessee Titans last year was Azeez Al-Shaair. Played over 1,000 snaps. But typically they have guys that can play upwards of 1,000 snaps, two guys that can play all three phases. The problem is that to get the best out of Kenneth Murray, you're going to have to take advantage of what he thinks his skill set is. Like, he's very instinctual, but he's very strong and fast, which means that if you put him as a quarterback spy or running back spy, he's going to be able to handle that. If you are asking him to diagnose whatever's happening in zone coverage and trying to diagnose that and trying to figure out, do I take that route or this wide receiver? Which one do I do? Like, that's where you're getting into an issue. And that's typically what your green dot linebacker gets over. So basically to get the best out of Kenneth Murray, you have to have a calming force that can handle the load of all the mental aspects of the game, getting people in the right position, calling the plays, diagnosing the offense, and making sure everyone's doing their adjustments properly on the field. Kenneth Murray needs to be a mercenary. Here's my one job on this one play. I'm going to do it. And I think if you do that, you can get average to maybe slightly above average play. But that's going to have to be how you do it. You have to take as much responsibility away from Kenneth Murray, and you have to have a linebacker that can take all that responsibility and be able to be that guy 1,000 snaps every this season.
Yeah. Okay. I think a great explanation. I agree 100%. I have one more question, and then we can, whatever we else want to talk about, and then we can get out of here. Of the remaining free agents out there, like I'm just looking at the remaining list of unsigned guys on PFF right now. Is there a guy, and if so, who are you like, I'd kill for this guy to be on the team, and why?
Ooh, of any
I'll let you think about it. I have my answer.
I think my guy would be DJ Reader.
Mine is.
I was going to say the same one.
Good content, guys.
Is that
Good
everybody's
content.
guy?
It is. Yeah. I'd kill for DJ Reader on this team.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, we'll give you a couple of guys.
Okay.
If you wanted to go get Marcus Peters, I'd be fine with Marcus Peters. I'm not killing anybody for Marcus Peters, or I have to have Marcus Peters, but that's a guy.
I hope you're not killing anybody for anybody, just to be super clear.
Stephon Gilmore, Steven Nelson are some cornerbacks. Listen, I'd take a flyer on Tre'Davious White. I know everybody's down on Tre'Davious White right now, but that's going to be a guy that's going to be super motivated. I'd be okay with either of those guys for a defensive back across from Chidobe. I think Jerome Baker is going to be one of the guys that I'm really pushing hard for. Tyrell Dodson, I would go ahead and sign both of them if you could. Tyrell Dodson was also a linebacker from Buffalo. He's really young. He could be your Jerome Baker insurance if he were to get injured or something. But I mean, I think DJ Reader is the guy that I'm like most coveting right now out on this free agency.
Yeah, I would agree that it's Reader. If I could go to Ran Carthon when I was there today and say, Ran, sorry, you have to make the signing right now. Thanks, let me know when it's done. It would be DJ Reader, just because it would fill that pretty significant gap that they have up front on defense right now. In terms of giving me peace of mind for the next 5-6 weeks before the draft, I would probably go Mekhi Becton, just because I would feel at ease that if they were to come out with just one tackle in their draft class, I'm not terrified. Like that would be the case. You know what I mean? Because if they go into this draft without addressing the need in free agency, like you talked about earlier, Zach, I'm scared, man. If like I'm going to be silently rooting tackle, go tackle. Please just go tackle. Make me happy. And they probably won't. And so getting Mekhi Becton, who is, again, not a certainty, but the way that he played as a rookie on that Jets team, if you're forecasting, a offensive line guru and Bill Callahan being able to get that best out of him, he has the size, height, weight, strength, movement, skills on paper. It's in his body. You just got to get it out of him. That's the kind of guy that it would make the biggest impact for me mentally in terms of comfortability with this team right now.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Mine, real quick. I think in the same kind of sense, I think they do need to sign another cornerback before the draft. Whether it becomes in the next 2 days, in the next 2 weeks, I think they need to add maybe one or two because of how barren that room is. Unless you want to go with the statistical, absolutely Chad that is Eric Error in the statistical category. I mean, you could keep him, I guess, but other than that,
you're referring to his yards per catch allowed or whatever that metric
yes,
was. Where he's like
the one where he is just absolutely dominant in. Besides that, I think
can't argue with the numbers, man.
They have to go get at least two, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's all defense, right? I think Mekhi Becton, Tyron Smith, they're the only really players. Like if they spent a little bit of money on Curtis Samuel or a little bit of money on Hollywood Brown, that's all right.
You say a little bit. What's the number for you, Zach? Where
max $5 million for either of those guys. Okay. Like max 1 year, $5 million.
Okay, all right.
No. I mean, anything over. I mean, like, okay, maybe $8 million with incentives isn't going to be that bad, but like, guaranteed money needs to be $5 million. He hasn't done anything to earn higher than that, and you could tell by his market that nobody wants Hollywood Brown because he's been terrible.
Right. So if it pops up on your radar screen, Hollywood Brown 2-year, $19.5 million contract, you're furious.
It may be worse than you may see a worse reaction than NWI or Jack Gibbons getting $900,000 or $9,900, whatever.
Yeah,
like that's ridiculous in my mind because that is. I mean, I get it. Oh, he could just be a wide receiver 3. Problem is, he just can't catch. It doesn't matter if he's a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 1.
That's
Motherfucker
important.
just doesn't catch. He just doesn't catch. But
anything else?
But I do think that if the question I have for you guys before we go, Mekhi Becton or Tyron Smith is signed, and let's say that they have been told that they are going to play left tackle. Trade back Brock Bowers or
do you hang on? Okay, so do you foresee that being a thing where they show their hand in that way? I would be floored if they went and got an offensive lineman and a tackle in free agency and said, "Yep, and guess what? He's playing on this side of the ball for sure." I don't think they show their hand like that. But if they did,
I don't think they do either. But
so
I mean,
if they did hypothetically,
but if they did hypothetically, that really screams trade back and get picks and take JC Latham, right?
It certainly screams it screams trade back, but I'll just go back to what I said earlier when we were talking about tackles. I don't really care because they need one of both. So it gives me a better idea of who they're going to take, but it doesn't change at all my opinion that they need to take a tackle in the first round.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like I think that it would be very interesting to see that move made on top of the Calvin Ridley move because I feel like that really does a really good job of hiding your intentions. Whatever your intentions may be, does a really good job. And I agree. I forgot the Cameron Curl. Cameron Curl would be up near the top of my list of players that I would want. He could be your safety across from Amani Hooker. So I'd prefer him. I'd go Justin Simmons, Cameron Curl, then Marcus May way down. I'm not a big Marcus May believer, but it is what it is. It's safety. It doesn't really matter. I think that'll do it for us. I think we covered everything we wanted to cover on our list.
One last thing. One more thing. Just a random note for folks along the lines of things that I think that you should look tomorrow morning, sometime before 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, for the Titans to have another media availability with a certain free agent whose name you may or may not be able to surmise on your own.
There you go. All right. I would assume that is a guy by the name of Sadiq Charles.
Right. It'll be the Sadiq. Correct. He'll do 45 minutes on Sadiq Charles tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m.
Can't wait. Sadiq Charles, 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. All right. That'll do it for us. Football show, Hot Read podcast. When's your all's next show? Because this is kind of both of our shows. So when's the next
we
show?
should tell people that, just in case you didn't realize it, like, we're definitely not doing a show today. The part of the reason, just real quick, part of the reason we did this in the first place today was that I almost accidentally did a show with half of my mouth numb. I have a dentist appointment in like an hour, and in my head I was like, we'll just do the show after that. And then I forgot, like, I'm getting a filling, and so that would have been really entertaining content to see me slobber my way through a show, probably, but really not high quality. So we're not going to be doing that. This is today's show for the Hot Read podcast and for a football show. So the next football show will be, I think Braden's back on Monday, right?
Yes.
Braden back on Monday.
Barring wherever he's at, like if he's out in the wilderness, barring like getting attacked by a moose or something, I don't know.
True, we don't know whether or not he's alive, but assuming that he is, he'll be back with Zach on Monday on a football show at 1 Central, and then we will be back on a Hot Read pod at 4 or 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday next week, and those will be when we are next on this feed.
StackingTheInbox.com. Go subscribe. Today, I also have an article out at podcaharski.com. So go subscribe over there to get that.
How many times did you mention the sun exploding? How many times did you get to say it?
4 or 5, I think. There's someone that replied, like, who's your source that the sun is running out? Is this true about the sun? Who's your source?
You talked to Neil deGrasse Tyson? What's up?
So listen, in 5 billion years, the sun will have run out of hydrogen. That's all you need to know. In 5 billion years. So
you figured that out yourself? Did you do the math?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll set my thought.
Yeah, you couldn't Google the sun's running out of hydrogen when it's going to happen. But talked about that there. Got a lot going on at StackingTheInbox.com, of course, as well. I don't even know what I'm putting up tomorrow from Stoney at this point, because he's got like a bunch of articles banked that I really got to start putting out because it's draft season and all of this stuff is going to have to come out at some point. So
yes,
contracts are official for most of them. The numbers aren't out on everybody. Chidobe Awuzie, I think I got.
There you go.
That is out. So that's $6.9 million cap hit. We of course know Tony Pollard, and it was a $4 million cap hit. Jack Gibbons' tender cost $999,000 against the cap. So we don't have Lloyd Cushenberry, Calvin Ridley, at least as I refreshed during the show, or Kenneth Murray yet. So
I had a couple people asking me this. Do you have a guesstimate as of now at 2:28 p.m. on a Thursday what the Titans' existing cap space is? Is it in the like $45-ish million range?
It should be probably in the 60s.
Oh,
right now. And then once you take Lloyd Cushenberry, Kenneth Murray, and Nick Westbrook-Kine, Nick Folk, and Calvin Ridley, probably in the 50s. Okay. Now listen, this is 50s without, because you got to remember, Spotrac does not include your salary cap hits for draft picks. They also don't include some crazy workout bonus that apparently teams have to hold or something, and like over the cap includes both those things. So over the cap is traditionally always less than Spotrac until a certain point in the season where they kind of get close to each other.
Gotcha.
So on over the cap, it may be in maybe under 50, but Spotrac probably in the high 50s, I would assume.
Okay.
But I mean, again, I haven't gone through and I'm, once we get off of here, I'm going to let the dogs out, and then I'm going to update all that stuff. So to the question, who let the dogs out? It was me. I let the dogs out. But Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, can't leave them out of the show. Got to make sure that they stay in the show. Kingston Group, buildkg.com for your home remodeling needs. Locally owned, locally operated. Buildkg.com, and Sinkers Beverages, Uber Eats. They'll drive so you can drink, get whatever you want: beer, liquor, wine, non-alcoholic stuff, THC drinks. It doesn't matter. They have it all at Sinkers Beverages, East Nashville, award-winning Sinkers Beverages. Join the in crowd to make sure that you know, because I forgot to say this at the beginning. Join the in crowd, and JT, you'll have to do our outro because my mouse just died on me. So
blind out here
just died on me. But either way, I think it was the Bluetooth. The Bluetooth died on me. So either way, Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, buildkg.com, and this has been a football show.